Episode 16 of the New England Sports Media Podcast features Pete Nakos, sports reporter for the Valley News, up in the valley between New Hampshire and Vermont, former Ohio U Bobcat, and current sports reporter. Pete, how is it going?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. Things are good. It's been a wild, what is it, like 8 months now? But yeah, I'm back in sports and happy to be back at it.
No doubt. So give us a little rundown of, so you were a 2019 or 2018 college grad?
So I graduated from Ohio University in Athens in 2019.
Okay.
So I just celebrated my 1 year reunion or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So graduated in 2019, in May 2019. Had a couple opportunities to go a couple places, didn't really pan out. And then I ended up that August in my own backyard back in the Valley News in West Lebanon, in the upper Connecticut River Valley. Back here doing that, did that for about 8 months. And then obviously the pandemic hit and it changed everyone's lives one way or the other. And I was actually only laid off for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then transitioned over to news at New Hampshire Public Radio. I've always wanted to be a sports writer specifically, so it was definitely a change of pace for me. Obviously, we all do our share of podcasts, and we're multimedia journalists, but hadn't really done radio before. So went over there, did that, helped produce a show about the pandemic, and was a community engagement producer and helped facilitate story ideas and sources for those reporters.
So can you kind of describe the process of when you got laid off from the Valley News and then found the radio job? How did that kind of come together? Did you know people there? Did they reach out to you? And more of, I guess this is more kind of advice for kids coming out of college probably, or people who are in similar situations. But how did you facilitate that process?
So I got laid off on a Tuesday. I still remember the day and all that. And at the time I was pretty pissed off. I was we're only 2 weeks into this and I'm already getting laid off. But I was lucky enough that I had enough connections from my time at the Valley News that when New Hampshire Public Radio knew that it needed to hire a temporary community engagement producer, my name got passed along thanks to my former employer. And then the mix of having good connections, being from New Hampshire definitely helped because I knew the landscape. Obviously, it's New Hampshire Public Radio. But at the same time, just being young, understanding that, at the end of the day, hard work is going to be what really sets yourself apart, and just understanding that. And also, I think I made a name for myself in the way that the Valley News wanted me to go on and do good things. It was a very mutual parting of ways when I got laid off, obviously.
Right.
So
what's it been covering sports right now?
Covering sports right now is probably the weirdest thing I have ever done in my life. You got to wear a mask all the time. I cover New Hampshire and Vermont. So New Hampshire, they're playing football and all that, and athletes don't have to wear masks, but then you go cover games in Vermont, and the games in Vermont, all the athletes wear masks. And that has been a huge challenge, I know, for athletic directors. I'm working on a story about that right now. But it's just so different. And it's so cliche, but all the coaches talk about how lucky they are. But in all honesty, at the end of the season, I don't really think anyone's truly going to care if they won a championship or not. It's just been the fact that people can be with their friends and not be able to just get outside. It's something that we forget about, but at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was just sitting around with nothing to do.
I'm kind of curious too, because it's different for everyone coming out of college. When you were graduating from Ohio U, what was the job search like? What were you getting offers? Because we know kids who went to Iowa to start out or some random place. So what was the job search like, and what were the offers like for you coming out of college even before the pandemic?
Yeah. So when I graduated from college, I had the opportunity to go to Wyoming and work for a small newspaper in Wyoming, and I turned that down. I was a final candidate out there, and I probably in my interview did not sound as excited to go to Wyoming as someone trying to get a job should have, but it is what it is. And then I interviewed for a couple more jobs. I had an opportunity to move out to California and work for a Gannett shop out there, which would have been cool, but I wasn't 100% sure. And then this Valley News job opened, and I had like gone away from like home for 4 years, which is like probably the best decision I've made in my like young life. But I was like okay with being in New England for my first job, and I also like wasn't sure. I mean, the other job opportunities I had were with like big shops, and obviously I wasn't confident that like being laid off or things like that. So obviously wanted to go get my first opportunity then, and just happy it panned out how it did.
Yeah, for sure. So so you went to like high school in Manchester, so pretty close, but not like right down.
So I'm like 90 minutes from home, like where I'm
Okay.
at. So like definitely the space that is needed. I'm also like not like running into people that I used to all the time in high school, which is what it is. So yeah, that's good though.
What's it like being like a young dude living where you're living? What's the experience like?
It's very interesting. I had this idea that I was gonna like befriend like Dartmouth students because like Hanover is like 10 minutes away. That hasn't necessarily happened just because of the pandemic, but it's been good. I work with a great newsroom of people. I am the youngest, so I mean that has its difficulties sometimes, but overall it's good. And then I also have like high school friends who I've like reconnected with who are like scattered throughout the Northeast. It's also as you guys know, as a young sports writer, like the hours are crazy. So like I am not just kicking around on a Friday night and like hanging out with people. I'm like at a high school football game or field hockey, and that's where I want to be, but it also doesn't necessarily lend to the best social life.
So I'm curious, like all the other 2019 grads in your class, like at Ohio U, did a lot of them end up with jobs like before the pandemic? And if so, like were they able to keep them, or did they find themselves in similar situations to you?
So I graduated with a handful of like guys from the student newspaper, and then over at the TV station too, WAEB. And like there's a handful of us who like are still employed in what we wanted to do. Like one of my best friends, Spencer, covers Ohio State football for a startup that's actually doing really well. So he's doing that. I also just worked with some guys and girls who just like really wanted to do it. And the first like year and a half has just been brutal. And like people are just going out and finding other things, and it's understandable. It's also just like really tough right now to like go get another job because like you're not gonna go do an in-person interview. You're not gonna like go win out an in-person interview because those just aren't happening. So I know of people who are still like going and getting jobs. One of my friends who graduated in like 2018, Kellen just landed a job with the Ringer. So like it's just everybody is on their own path, and it is very different right now because of the pandemic. But I will say networking like set me up for success in like the sense of like I feel confident going into interviews and things just because like I went to like the APSC national conference like going into my senior year, and it's just a good way to meet editors and stuff. So yeah.
And what's the experience like at OU? Is it, like a Syracuse where it's competitive to, cover games, do broadcast? What's it kind of like over there?
It's very competitive in its own little way. You're in a little bubble covering a Division I athletic team in the hills of Appalachia. So like you are not at a Missouri or Syracuse necessarily where there's also like 5 other professional publications. There's just the one little local newspaper, the Athens Messenger. Jason Arkley just does a fantastic job, and he's like a good guy to like compete with. But then it's like all these different student media outlets, and like student media like runs the scene other than the Athens Messenger. And it is competitive, but it in its own like way. Like I wouldn't say that it's like it's just a different level of competition because at Syracuse, like you get like ESPN rolling in the town, and like you have midweek action at OU, but like that's like not even like comparable. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no, and I was lucky enough. So I worked for the Ohio athletic department for 2 years and traveled with the football and basketball teams and like tried to be a staff writer for them. And that was awesome. But I'm not a PR guy. I want to be able to like say my opinions when things happen. So I went back over to the student newspaper my senior year, and that was a great experience. And being able to cover Division I athletics really just like opens up your eyes about how much is going on. Because in the Northeast, I mean, you guys know it, like we are not college athletics focused whatsoever. But the Midwest is so college driven.
And do you see people with like heavy interest even in OU football over there?
Oh yeah, I mean, alums really care. They read all the stuff, and then people in Southeast Ohio definitely care. I mean, Ohio State is the team, but people definitely care about OU football. And interestingly enough, when it comes to football, plenty of readers are from Nebraska too, because Frank Solich coached out in Nebraska for most of his life, and obviously was the coach of the Cornhuskers for 3 years, 4 or 5 years, and he almost won a national title. So then they fired him and stuff, but he's still out in Athens. He's like in year like 16 or 18 now, and yeah, he just turned 75. He's a legend. His own right. But yeah.
How is that guy in press conferences and stuff? Nice guy?
Frank is a very nice guy. Frank at the same time also knows how to work the media very well because he's been doing it for most of his life. So you're just not going to get like he's going to tell you how it is, and he is always going to talk up the opponent. And yeah, I mean, it's just Frank. He's a funny guy. He's a good guy at heart. He is definitely old school though. He's about as old school as it gets. I want to say he's like the second or third oldest coach in college football still coaching. So
as you've gone back to the sports game, or actually, can you kind of tell us how you got back into how you got, like when you got rehired, like was it kind of just an agreement that when things get better, you'll be back, or like how did that work out?
So I was in a position where the New Hampshire Public Radio gig was like a temp job.
Okay.
But then I actually, like, not to talk myself up too much, but like I did well enough where they created a position, and I like had applied for the position and stuff, and I had an opportunity possibly to work there full time. But the Valley News called in like late August, and I had been missing going out in the field and reporting, writing about sports. Also just like reporting and writing. That wasn't as much as my job as it had been. Through talks with the Valley News and stuff, I mean, they talked me back, and I came back and stuff, but I mean, they definitely had to talk me back into it a little bit. They also understood though, like that I had missed doing the job, and then completely left amicably with NHPR. And I think they're still going to hire a community engagement producer. I haven't heard about that, but yeah. So yeah, it was a great experience over there though. Like definitely a better journalist now because I worked in public radio.
So as part of your coverage, you also do Dartmouth stuff a little bit, right? So how's their athletic department cover? I'm guessing it probably gets less attention than the Ohio U department. And so what is like, is access pretty free reign?
So like last year, for example, right? It was like my first year, and I did men's and women's basketball because at the time we still had a bigger Dartmouth guy. And I could like go to practices when I wanted. If I wanted to like talk to a player on the phone, you talk to a player on the phone. Very different than my college days where like I still went through a media relation, like an SID. But the SID was much more excited to talk to me on the phone than they were at OU because there was just enough coverage back there where you could be more of a nuisance as a college student than anything else, as you guys probably know. But yeah, I free enough reign. But the interesting thing about Dartmouth that I have discovered, and I mean, I knew it when I started covering this, but like they're an Ivy League school and they're a private school. So like you do not know salaries, like you cannot FOIA anything. It is all kept behind closed doors. And usually that like wouldn't be the biggest problem, but like they just cut 7 sports this past summer. So like you don't like really know the financials and stuff. And that's obviously a huge thing right now. So as open as it is, it's also like closed off too. But I guess it's just kind of what it's like in the Ivy League.
No, for sure. We experienced that at BU too. Like we've always wondered what coaches make, and like we can't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like very interesting. And then when they go and cut sports and like you don't have figures in front of you, you're like left to try to piece it together, but you just can't.
So what is so when you're balancing like covering the two different athletics like conferences or in states, are there a lot of different rules that you kind of have to like write down and kind of like remember how things work? Is there a lot of overlap? Do they play each other? Like what's it like covering two different states for high school athletics?
So like when I took the job, I was like, man, this is gonna be a lot. But then you get out there and do it, and like soccer is soccer. The clock stoppage is a little bit different sometimes, but not a lot. There aren't that many rule differences. You just have to like remember. I will honestly say the biggest challenge is like I'm from New Hampshire, so like I know all like the New Hampshire like teams and mascots and logos, but like Vermont is like this brand new world to me. Like there's like a team called like the Mill River Minutemen, and like there's just like team names that like I've never heard of. So just making sure you're on the ball about that stuff and things like that. And also just making sure you like know the state history so you can actually put some things in context.
Right.
So.
And what's your schedule like now? Like, are you guys going into an office at all, or are you just going to games and working from home?
So I am working from home and going to games. I can go in the office, but they're only letting 6 like editors and reporters in there at a time, which is understandable. I don't feel like the job changes that much in the sense of like I can still do what I need to do. I do miss like the camaraderie though. Like we talked about this earlier. I'm young, like I'm like social. I like want to go talk to people, and just having to like sit in your apartment and then like go like cover games can like be a downer sometimes. But it also gives way to like, I mean, when you're young and stuff, you're also like super hungry to like go do more features. So I find myself like maybe taking some free time to like spend some more time on other stories and things like that. But yeah.
You have any features in the works right now? What are you working on?
Yeah, so I got 2 stories coming out on Sunday. One is about mask enforcement. Obviously, like that's been a big thing, definitely in Vermont too, just because they have to wear masks when they play. So like athletic directors haven't had to stop games because kids wearing down like chin straps and stuff, and it's just like been this huge headache for so many different parties this year. And then I'm working on another story. A local high school made like Black Lives Matter T-shirts and just talking about how student athletes are taking on social issues in the Upper Valley, and also like striking the chord of the difference of like trying to understanding what Black Lives Matter means, and also like not just doing it to be like a professional athlete. Because I mean, what happened this summer was awful. And the way the NBA and WNBA responded, I mean, was needed. But now high school kids just also have to understand like what it means when you take a knee during the national anthem, and it's not just like to be in the spotlight. So, and the kids I've talked to completely understand that, but I just think it's a important thing to have a conversation about.
Yeah, definitely. And with the first story you're working on, do you find that like talking to athletic directors and coaches, do you find that they see like the mask as a burden, or do you find that they're like angry with their kids for not adhering to it? Like where do these guys kind of stand on that?
Most of the athletic directors I've talked about like completely understand why people need to wear masks. They find it to be most frustrating because it's just like at this point, like we're almost like a year into this pandemic. I mean, like we're like over 6 months in, so it's almost like beating the drum and like no one's listening, and you're like talking to like a wall sometimes. And obviously athletic directors can understand how like when you're an 18-year-old student, you might not like think it's like the biggest deal in the world, but I mean, it is a big deal, and it is the rule, and this is the rule, so you have to follow it. It has been interesting to talk to some like football officials though about like I talked to one football official in Vermont yesterday, and Vermont's doing 7v7 football this year, not contact. And he said that when like kids don't wear masks, like he sends them off like it would be if like a helmet popped off. So just how like different parties handle it very differently. And at the end of the day, everyone's just trying to get people to wear masks so everyone's safe.
For sure. For sure. All right. I think that's all we got, Pete. We appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Yeah. I apologize about the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
problem.
All good. It's all good. Well, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, of course. How's news, Greg? You
Oh,
doing
it's
okay?
all right.